and interest in this group. Really excited. Uh, as a reminder, yeah, so this session is being recorded and will be posted on our website for future review, or if anyone can't make it, they can look at it later. I do want to start off by quickly reintroducing myself. I know that I'm newer here to this work group. So my name is Sarah Oki. I am the research specialist here at the Liquor and Cannabis Board. I am also the current acting research manager for the newly developed research unit. And this research unit is really just starting out, and we're building our foundation and solidifying our small team. But I'm really excited that the research team will stay as the main facilitator of this work group, while simultaneously creating an open platform for the policy team and for other teams at LCB to come and gain valuable insight that this group holds. And the transition from Kathy Hoffman facilitating this group to myself or to the research team more broadly has really come at a really optimal time, given that the recommendation document that was finalized on the detectable levels of THC and cannabis product safety has been finalized. So this means that this work group will begin to start reviewing what the next topic interest is going to be. And that is on our agenda for today, reviewing what this group will look like going forward and reviewing research interest areas from the team, board members, what you all have identified, and then discussing next steps. Okay, so with that being said, I do want to do a roll call, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently than Kathy has done it in the past. If you could all just type, if you guys are here, which you're hearing me now, if you could type your name in the chat, just so I can make sure that everyone who is here is accounted for. I saw a chat. Where is the chat? See here, all of these different. Okay, so David Gang is not going to be out, is out of the country, so he won't make it here today. Thank you. Okay, so, and I know that Tracy Klein won't be able to make it as well today. So Jessica Tanani, Taylor Carter, Grandma Cat Jeter, Ryan McLaughlin, Angela Peck, Denise Laflamme, Madeline Graverson, Carrie Trumple. All right, welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Again, please enter your name if you didn't, so we can make sure that we have your attendance here. Okay, so first off, I sent you all minutes from the last work group from October 5th. I didn't receive any emails about updates to these minutes. Does anybody have any requests or comments for revisions of those minutes on October 5th? Okay. Great. So don't see any hands or any comments. So then those minutes are approved and those will be uploaded onto our website as well. Right, I'm going to stop sharing. So the next agenda for today was to look at THC bill questions and feedback. And that was originally going to be kind of facilitated by Cassidy West, our policy and rules manager. However, she is not able to make it today. So I am going to try my best to ask you some of the questions that she is interested in getting your feedback on. Now, I do know She is drafting a document right now to be able to send to you to get any more feedback from you if you have the ability to do that. She will also be holding stakeholder engagement sessions on the 15th and the 19th to have this topic more publicly discussed. So let me bring up these questions here. Okay. So again, bear with me with facilitating what what Cassidy originally wanted to discuss, but in a broader sense, with this THC bill comes with a need for having standardized definitions of things, and understanding how we're defining certain words and how they might go into rulemaking. So part of what Cassidy was hoping to discuss with you all is how we're differentiating between active THC, total THC, THC concentration. So any thoughts about how you might define or differentiate those three items?
I think in statute, generally, we always refer to total THC. So using the essentially delta 9 plus 0.87 times THCA as, as essentially the potential of THCA or THC, sorry.
Yeah. So part of this discussion is with this new THC bill, we're striking the delta 9 to include all other THC components. And so I'm curious, Jessica, how you might revise that, given the total THC has originally included delta 9, but now that we're striking that, how might you better word that?
I mean, to be brutally honest, I think that we attempted to not have that language. We attempted to have the specific cannabinoids called out so that labs would know what to test for and have the math around it. Without the math around it, it's difficult to tell essentially the potential for whatever we want to call it. Let's call it impairment. But if, for example, THCA is not equal to THC, there's, that decarb. So I know Brad's on the phone too, and he used to run a testing lab. I don't know if Ryan or Taylor have anything to say, but I would say it's pretty difficult if we are saying if we don't have a definition of what the compounds are, to say what the math the lab should have behind it is.
Thank you. Other comments from that?
I would add, I mean, again, it's similar to what you just said, where it's tough. I mean, I guess the question itself, I can't really answer it, but to like group THCV and delta 9 together is, from a molecular standpoint, scientific and stuff, is so far apart. You could be giving the same total information, but the actual cellular effect, macro effect on the person is so vastly different that you're almost misleading in that statement. So I can't really add the best way to do it, but just my opinion on it would be to potentially group. I can understand delta 8 and delta 9. I do research with both. Immunologically, they're very similar. Dose-dependent response, immunologically similar. I know in the nervous system it's different, but when you're looking at THCV versus delta 9, to group those two together is difficult to kind of give a good definition, or what that would look like.
Okay. So Taylor, you're saying it makes a bit more sense for grouping delta 8 and delta 9, but for like THCV, that's not really, doesn't make sense on a molecular level.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that there was, if I could be wrong, but some differentiation also between like naturally occurring, extracted from the plant versus semi-synthetic or synthetic. I don't remember if that made the bill, but I think that there was some active discussion around if you differentiate those, I think it becomes a little bit easier.
So that does kind of lead us to the next, and if anybody has any other comments related to that, the next question was about defining synthetic and looking at how that might inform the rule. So I guess before we move on to that specific topic, does anybody else have any comments related to differentiating or defining active THC, total THC, THC concentration, and as it relates to kind of stripping just the Delta 9 from that?
I think if we step back and say the intent was to prevent some of these compounds being sold as without some sort of regulation around the potential for impairment. And so I think that it's important for us to remember what the intent was and try to figure out if we can differentiate the best way to initiate rules around that intent, given kind of, what Taylor's mentioned, as well as the fact that our labs have to have a list of what they're going to test to.
Thanks, Jessica. So then moving to synthetic and defining synthetic. Cassidy sent me 3 different options for this. The first one is because it's not currently defined, it defaults to like a dictionary definition of synthetic, which states something resulting from synthesis rather than occurring naturally, especially a product of chemical synthesis. So that's like the dictionary definition of synthetic. There is also language of synthetic cannabinoid in RCW 69.50.455, which says synthetic cannabinoid includes any chemical compound identified or by the Pharmacy Quality Assurance Commission under RCW 69.50.201. Or we could create an entire new definition for synthetic cannabinoid or synthetically derived cannabinoid. So I guess maybe my first question then would be, what do you think about that dictionary definition of something resulting from synthesis rather than occurring naturally?
I think the problem with that is people are synthesizing compounds like Delta 8 that occur naturally in the plant, and there's no robust mechanism but that labs can differentiate whether it's synthetic or whether it's naturally occurring from the plant in a product.
Okay. Any thoughts related to that? Thank you, Jessica.
I'll add to that, Sarah. This is Brad.
Hi, Brad.
I think
Thank you.
the dictionary definition is a little tautological in that, it defines synthesis by something that's synthetic. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we see is that nobody agrees, or very few people agree, what synthetic means. So we need more meat to the definition to make it testable or enforceable.
So what might that meat look like then?
Well, we can move on to, I think, to the second proposed definition. I think the synthetic cannabinoid definition that's in statute is too broad because it refers to a broader class of compounds that act on cannabinoid receptors. I think we need something. I think we discussed this on some of our deliberative dialogues a year or two ago. we talked about anything that's been chemically modified as a way of defining synthesis broadly, or a synthetic cannabinoid broadly. And that can include anything beyond a synthetic step or beyond decarboxylation, which is common to cannabinoid manufacturing.
And Brad, if I'm remembering right, we approached it slightly by saying the only thing that people could do was heat, light, and pressure. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, we tried to define what are the type of operations that would occur in food handling or you'd expect to occur that wouldn't be a chemical transformation. And that is how we came down on it. Heat, pressure, light are the only allowable operations where you could chemically modify any cannabinoid and it not be chemical synthesis or not be synthetic.
And that was because that would allow people to do decarboxylation.
Right, exactly.
And there's certain states, I think it was New York, there was a state or two that accidentally banned decarboxylation. So we wanted to make sure that we did not do that because that was essentially what everybody in 502 wants to do. So we didn't want to ban that.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, so any definition or anything that would be pushed through definitely needs to make sure that is not banned. Yeah. Any other thoughts surrounding defining synthetic cannabinoid or synthetically derived cannabinoid?
I personally think it's easier to define what people can do versus what is not allowed. But that's my personal, so people can do these type of reactions and anything else is not allowed versus the inverse because the bucket of what people will get creative on is huge, but that's my personal opinion.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
This is Brad again. I absolutely agree with Jessica. I think it's easier to define that allowed list of transformations or what can be done, particularly heat, light, pressure. We had originally in some of our discussions proposed having changes in pH. Like you might think that a cannabinoid acid, you could turn it into a salt by changing the pH. But one of the objections to that was, well, you can pass compounds through acidic media and you can isomerize compounds from delta 9 THC to delta 8 or things like that. So that was one objection to having that type of transformation be kept or to still be prohibited.
Thank you, Brad. Okay. Anyone else related to this idea of defining THC, active THC, synthetic? So I know that within this THC bill that is being proposed with rule changes and these different stakeholder engagement sessions that Cassidy is going to follow up with you more related to this. I know that there were also some questions related to the recommendation doc that was recently finalized, and that's something that that she will provide more specific questions on. Denise and Jeff, is there anything further that you think that it would be important to ask related to this discussion before we move on?
Yeah, I don't have anything beyond
Okay.
what you covered. And then, yeah, without some other specific direction too from Cassidy. So
Okay.
thank you.
Sounds good. So thanks so much for your feedback on that. And like I said, just the very initial discussion before we're able to get a little bit more specific details about feedback that Cassidy is also looking for. And she did tell me that she was gonna get that document with questions for you all soon for your review, and then to put it on Gov Delivery as well. All right, so moving then into the next topic area. So I now want to transition the conversation over to what this work group will look like moving forward. And to start off this conversation, I want to reiterate the purpose and objective of this work group as identified in the original charter that you put together a year ago. So the purpose of the Cannabinoid Science Work Group is to provide an environment for scientific and data-driven discussion about cannabinoids with the objective to collaboratively and transparently explore and build foundational understanding of cannabis as well as its synthetic equivalents. In addition, this work group is headed by the research unit. As I said, it's a newly formed and quickly developing unit, and our mission is to conduct and analyze and report internal and external research that is evidence-based, objective, and nonpartisan, so free from bias. And with that, I do want to discuss the structure of this research unit, especially given the transition from Kathy, who started this work group within policy and rules team, and then transitioned into the research program. And I want to acknowledge and emphasize that with the advent of this new research team is that the research team are researchers. We're not policymakers. We review research and we conduct nonpartisan research. And then we'll have individuals who are like our policy and rules team, Cassidy West and Denise and Jeff and other team members to come in and gain areas of expertise. And so the Liquor and Cannabis Board has really emphasized the importance of having a research unit to bring more research and scientific knowledge and empirical evidence to LCB. And as a researcher, it is really important, and I know that we've shared this in this group as well, that we can speak and be transparent about what we do know as well as what we don't know about the products and services that LCB regulates. And so I really want to structure the group to make sure that we are being able to create more clarity about that, what we do know and what we don't know. And then I also think it's important to acknowledge meeting in the middle with policy, where we understand that scientific knowledge may not be fleshed out fully, but figuring out how we can use what we do know to help create more empirical recommendations that are grounded in literature. So moving forward, as I mentioned, the research team will be more so interested in topics that are deemed important in the scientific field, and then we'll have regular participation from policy and rules team and perhaps other areas of LCB to have those meet in the middle discussions, create those recommendations. So thinking about moving forward, I'm really interested in having this work group, which meets once every 2 months, be an expert panel on different topics. So really being the springboard for creating documents that are shared within the community and within the agency about current and really prominent scientific knowledge on specific topics, and then how we can use science to embed that within policy and rulemaking. And then because this is the research team, we also want to figure out how we can utilize your expertise to jump into what might be longer term research projects and topics as well. So I just want to stop. Any thoughts or comments related to anything I just said?
Sounds great.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
So what I did for this meeting, so I watched past work groups. I got a sense of what areas of interest were identified in the group. I looked at that matrix that Kathy had developed with all of you. I looked at the identified research areas of interest for the research unit, which I will go through in a second, and how kind of the strategic plan in the agency and conversations with board members and management and other research agendas outside this organization to kind of guide where we might go from here. Broadly speaking, the research unit has developed 3 large research priority areas, which involve medical cannabis, broadly speaking, medical cannabis, increasing education, prevention, harm reduction, and enhancing communication and collaborations within and outside the agency. The research unit in it of itself is not only interested in cannabis, but given the focus of this group, I put together some specific interests that you have previously discussed and how they relate to your areas of expertise and how the research unit areas of focus kind of dovetail within those topics. So with that, I am going to share my screen with you. Oh, I see one comment. That is the most realistic goal I've heard. Okay. Can people see this? Okay. So I'm going to, hopefully, if I can figure out the technology, I'm going to be giving you a little ranking where we can rank different research areas that we might be of interest. I pulled these research areas again, kind of dovetailing from what I've heard on the research unit interests, the agency's interests, and I came up with these, I don't know, 6 or 7 of them. So I'm going to read them out to you. So what types of information about cannabinoids can help people make better decisions about what they consume? What do we know and don't know about synthetic cannabinoids? How do we define and discuss impairing and intoxicating, and particularly in the context of driving? How do we increase consumer safety in the absence of scientific knowledge? What are the best practices in product labeling? What are the paths forward in structure and function claims as it relates to medically compliant products? And what are the standard definitions for ingredient, processing, conversion, and synthetic? So I'm curious whether there is a specific topic that I have missed from discussions that you've had, because I haven't been involved in all of the work groups so far, and most of the work groups so far. So I first want to ask, is there anything glaring that is missing from these research topics?
One of the things we talked quite a bit about in context of kind of the DDT, DDX situation is the evaluation of the pesticide, heavy metal research around that area and how that correlates to product safety. I don't think that we have a very good understanding of, for example, what soil is safe to grow in at this point. And that type of guidance, I think, could be really helpful to producers as well as consumers.
Okay, great. Is that question worded correctly, Jessica, or should I change that? What is the research around pesticides and product safety?
Yeah, pesticide and heavy metals, I would say. And maybe how that correlates to, guidance that we give around licensing and things like that in the state.
Thanks, Jessica. I do remember hearing that conversation. And any other areas or topic areas that you feel are missing from this list that you had previously talked about in the work groups? Okay.
I can jump in and give a little bit of an update for you guys. I don't know if don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but regarding the DDX, we've been working closely with ecology to actually do some of that research. So it's really exciting. I wish Dr. Gang was here because he has agreed to do the research on the uptake studies. And so I've been helping out and involved in the scope of work for that project. So it's pretty exciting to know that that work's been going on and I think is ongoing. And now that, the attention has been brought to that area, I think it'll open up a lot of doors for more research. So I'll keep you guys posted too on how that research is going. I know they've already collected the soil, I think just this last week. I've been working closely with ecology on that. So ecology has collected soil and Dr. Gang is going to be growing hemp in contaminated soils so we can get some uptake studies. So I'll keep you guys posted though on how that research is going.
Very neat. Thanks, Angela. Very exciting. Yes, please keep us posted on that. And I think when we're also deciding this next topic interest, I do think that part of our discussions can be creating these kind of alerts or memos of this, we need more research on this topic, and have this kind of create this platform of here's what we know, here's what we don't know, and here's where we would support more research.
And I think some of the agricultural studies like these DDT studies are feasible within the scope of what we can do in the state of Washington and have, fairly significant impact to our market.
Okay, so any last thoughts related to any additional topics that were previously identified that is not up here? Okay. All right, so now let's see if I can get this technology to work. In order for us to have this conversation, I'd love to do a little just ranking exercise. So let's see if this works. So if you can either go on this QR code, and maybe I can also bring this into chat, and take some time to rank order what you think is most important for this work group to work on, from highest to lowest priority. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, if this technology works, we can see in real time kind of where these responses are being submitted, and then we can have further discussion about this. So I'm just going to pause for a second for people to bring this up. Let me know if you can't see this or be able to submit your responses.
Cassidy, is there any, should we give any context to like what's actually like feasible in a shorter period of time, or? logistics or just what we,
Just what you think is the most, and then we can kind of drive kind of what the feasibility is moving forward. Because that is the next kind of topic area that I want to talk with you. Okay, so I'm going to, I know there's a lot of long questions on this, so I'm gonna wait until for 2 or 3 more minutes, so maybe until 10:45. So we'll resume then just to make sure everyone has time to put in their rank orders. Okay, so we have 3 responses. So if you are still filling it out, that's totally fine. And I really wanted to use this activity or exercise as a way to structure the conversation. It seems like we have what types of information about cannabinoids can help people make better decisions about their use. And what is the research around pesticides and heavy metals and how that correlates with guidance and product safety? As kind of the top 2. And then the third one is what are paths forward in structure and function claims as it relates to medically compliant cannabis. So Jessica, I'm going to go back to you, and you were asking about kind of feasibility versus priority. Can you speak a little bit more about what you were thinking?
Well, my thought is, for example, that the impairing and driving is as an issue that people have been trying to tackle, and there's been tens of millions of dollars put into that, and we as a group probably can report back the latest science, but not really move the ball, would be my take on that. But if you look at like the pesticide, heavy metal situation with, for example, the work that Angela was talking to, we could actually design and implement experiments here. Some of the things around structure, function claims, and medical, we could probably borrow from states like Minnesota and Pennsylvania and just kind of revamp the medical system. So there's certain things that we may be able to actually accomplish with a lower bar versus other things that may be significantly higher bars. And it's not that they're not a priority, it's just realistically meeting every other month as a group of volunteers in Washington. But I guess I appreciate other people's feedback on that.
Sure, yeah. So I am interested in hearing other feedback, and I do want to acknowledge that is, yes, you're completely right that meeting once every other month within a group of volunteers needs to be taken into account. And I also want to acknowledge that the research unit is interested and is invested in pursuing these longer term projects moving forward. So potentially, for example, with the impairing driving, yes, I mean, there's a lot to that. It's very complicated, and I agree that as of right now, this work group might kind of the extent of it might be kind of creating that literature review and saying, here, like, this is why we're struggling. Like, what are the specific areas of that like friction or inability to create those definitions, kind of creating that and being very transparent and clear about how that is a really difficult thing to kind of put out there, to define, or to create structure with. And if we have a meeting or two surrounding that, then the research team can really put together a document that really explains that in a clear way for LCB, for Washington, and figure out what avenues we may be looking towards within that very complex matter for longer term projects. I'm not sure if that makes sense, or if that answers kind of what you were thinking about, Jessica.
It does. I think that, some of these questions, other states like California have put significant resources, 20, $30 million in grant money behind. And we as a state haven't been as, willing to do that. And so I guess the question that I have is our goal in the state to figure out how we help consumers and products here, or like what are the resources and what that looks like. And I think if the resources are what they are today, then those first two or three things are probably within scope. But then some of these other things, I just don't even know if they're realistic in any sort of scope with the resources that have been given. But I appreciate other people's feedback on that. I don't want to be Debbie Downer.
No, not a Debbie Downer. I think that is very realistic, that we do have to look at what is feasible and what is, we don't want to recreate the wheel. And we don't want to start where other states have really put substantial amount of funding, when we can really look towards that and tackle something that is really going to be applicable and applied here and make a difference. Other thoughts related to what Jessica said, or about these top 3 topics from these 3 responses that were submitted? I'm curious about the types of information about cannabinoids can help, what types of information about cannabinoids that can help people make better decisions. I'm curious to hear about your thoughts on that specific question. or topic area.
I feel like that seems somewhat related to best practices in product labeling to an extent. I mean, giving consumers information, that's kind of where they need it most.
Yeah, so figuring.
And I think that, you know, there's some basic knowledge that not every consumer knows about, like time of onset and things like that, that has a tendency to have people potentially overconsume or underconsume, just not consume correctly.
So I hear like combining maybe those two of what type of information might be best suited on product labeling that might really reduce that harm and prevent uh, an adverse experience.
Or even maybe enable a good experience. I think we need to look at this in the context that everybody that's consuming it, it's not necessarily a bad situation, especially if we're looking at the context of medical patients, you know, help in what products may work and things like how long a patient should wait before they determine whether or not a product has worked.
I like that. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah, I agree. That's really nice.
I'll add one thing to that I've really been thinking a lot about in regards to just cannabinoids in general. Is a lot of data is out there. They're like, this may help with this, it may help with this. But when you look at it from an immunosuppressive standpoint, it may benefit something, but the model or the way that they looked at it, the point in time may be where that immunosuppression didn't have a negative side effect. So it's kind of, I guess it's just the time for me to bring this up. It's this idea of thinking about when you're telling someone this may help with this, right? Was there a time component looked at where there may be a risk of harm in a certain window? I don't know how much this has come up over time as cannabis probably gets moved more around the country, used medically. But it's this idea of there is potentially a window. Like one thing I'll bring up is like, I know it's completely kind of off topic, but like a carcinoma model I was looking at where THC was shown to shrink the tumor, but if it was given during tumor initiation, there was more tumor growth. So it's this idea of this time component of like, when are cannabinoids beneficial and when is there still a harm window? There's studies looking at, I think it was traumatic brain injury or was like spinal cord damage, where there's like a short window of 4 days where if you block the inflammatory process, you have longer, or I guess long-term consequences. But then if you use THC, and there was a couple other compounds they looked at after that window, then it was extremely beneficial. So it's this idea of there definitely is a potential harm window and then a greatly beneficial window in a lot of diseases. So it's this idea of, again, it's just kind of starting the discussion that this will probably come up more and more. Because again, we're seeing it, I work in translational medicine, so mainly with mice. But as a lot of this stuff moves into human models, it will start to be seen that there is this short-term window initially after disease onset or things like that, where, you know, there could be some harm. Let's look at like COVID, for example, papers coming out like, you know, take CBD, it can block viral replication, things like that. Well, during the onset of ARDS, when the virus or the bacteria is actually replicating, that immunosuppressive can be harmful. But once you get to the point where your body's kind of taking control, you have a huge inflammatory process, that immunosuppression is extremely beneficial. But again, if you gave that person at the wrong time, we can dose, you know, the same CBD dose, say in an ARDS model or acute lung injury model, before, during, and after, and you're going to have differential, you know, benefits. If you start too early, the disease may come on harder because you're suppressing some of that initial thing. So on that topic, again, it's so far away from where the science is of showing there's this tough window. You have to go through so many steps to get that out there. But it's just someone has to start the conversation, right? I guess, and this is just me starting it, of there is this window that at some point will probably have to be watched. And it's like just keeping that kind of on the back, just like the heavy metal, where, you know, I'm going to be submitting a paper in a month or two about THC's ability to block some of these kind of metal ROS creation in the body. And it's the same concept of that role of cannabinoids in metal is huge. And there's 2 or 3 papers this year looking at the role of the cannabis plant and cadmium uptake, copper, nickel, based on the soil, pH, and all these factors. And these papers are within 6 months. So a lot of this stuff is just steamrolling out, and it's trying to get in a situation where you realize there may be a risk area and just being alert to it so you don't get so far ahead and then this comes up and it creates a big debacle. So I know it's kind of a long spiel, but just what I've been reading and just kind of seeing that there are these areas to just be alert to. You may not have to make a big fuss about it now, but just to be alert that there are these areas to be cautious of.
I really appreciate that, and I think that's incredibly important. And I when looking at and creating information that would be important for the public to know of in a way that's palatable, I think that this work group has such a great potential of being able to figure out what are some things that the public would really benefit from understanding. And I love that, how the time component is such an important piece. Thank you so much. Any other thoughts related to that? Ryan, I see you're off mute.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of add to that, I think that was really well said, Taylor. And I think to add to that, another major issue that is probably something consumers are looking for, should be looking for, especially as our consumer market starts to evolve, whereby we're getting more and more older individuals using cannabis and drug interactions, because there doesn't seem to be very much information at all, at least for the consumer, particularly, to guide them with respect to some of the medications they may be taking and their efficacy when they're using cannabis. So I think that's a really important issue that maybe we could shed some light on as well.
I think one of the things that's important to, for us to realize is that when we rolled recreational under medical, roughly 10 years ago, we were out kind of on a limb as far as states go. And so we were really conservative on the information we wanted to give patients, like overly conservative, because we were concerned about federal government infringement. And things have changed. And there's other states that are actually doing this significantly better. If you look at states like Minnesota or Ohio or Pennsylvania, where they're doing things like requiring their research institutions to participate in cannabis research, where in the state of Washington, we don't allow that. And so we are, I think one of the things that this group can do is look at some of that information and figure out, how do we believe we can safely give this to consumers in such a way that isn't based upon rules that were from 10 years ago, when it was a very different federal oversight period.
Definitely. Thanks, Jessica. Okay. Any other comments or thoughts related about types of information that about cannabinoids that can help people make better decisions, and then research around pesticides and heavy metals and how that correlates with guidance? Great. So, like I said, I really want to take kind of this, and I'm gonna kind of taking what these comments were, as well as figuring out how we can move forward again in a way that is effective and a way that is going to use this time valuably, given that we have an hour to an hour and a half once every 2 months. So going forward, I'll be reviewing these comments as a team. I'll be getting more feedback from the agency, both within and outside the agency. Additionally, because this is this kind of new chapter point where the latest recommendations with Kathy was finalized, I am going to reach out to all of you individually and get a better sense of kind of what that looks like going forward. As Jessica mentioned, you all are volunteers, and we want to make sure that your time here is valuable and that we are providing value to you. And I think as we create the next topics going forward, figuring out whether you know there are additional experts that we might want to bring in or not. So just having more conversations around that. And then I'll contact you again about kind of what our next topic area will be for the next meeting. And that will be in February. So I'll give you a contact about that. And then also information related to the THC bill and Cassidy will also be sent out to you. Any final thoughts or questions or comments related to this discussion or related to what this group might look like going forward?
I just would say that you've done a wonderful job. This has been a really great and productive meeting, and it's moved very swiftly, and you've done, you know, a really great job of kind of guiding the discussion here. I think I'm excited for the future of what we could accomplish.
Thank you, Ryan, and I appreciate that, and I'm really excited to have this work group. We're currently a team. The research unit is a team of 2, me included. So, as we, I mean, you know, and I'm preaching to the choir here about there's so many different directions that we could take this and that we could go in, and this is, you know, we're climbing up a huge mountain in terms of what information we really need to know and investigate with cannabis. And so I think having this work group is so incredibly important to get more ears and areas of expertise. Especially especially given how all of our research areas of expertise are all very different, but can kind of coalesce into a strong force. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We will contact you soon to follow up with everything that we discussed, and then figure out how we're going to move forward with this group in the next couple of months. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.